Wave 2 of Fire Emblem Engage's DLC came out this week, adding 3 new emblems and 3 new maps to go along with them. Let's take a look at the new content to see if it's worth your time or if you should skip this one. The first thing you'll notice after downloading the DLC is a bunch of free goodies, including a bunch of silver ingots, some bond fragments, some gold, and several skill books which can be used to add SP to a character. The DLC also comes with a free silver lance, which will definitely make the early game of Engage maddening a little smoother, and the access to skill books and bond fragments will ensure that you have enough SP to learn some of the skills from the new emblems, even if you're starting the DLC mid-playthrough. I've seen some people say that these bonus items combined with the stat boosters from the first DLC wave will make maddening too easy, but I'm not too worried about this. It seems easy enough not to use the items from the DLC if you don't want to, except for maybe the golden bond fragments, which are easy to lose track of, but that doesn't seem too game-breaking to me. On the other hand, I think the addition of skill books will make building units a lot more fun for people that do want to use them. It will be possible to bring builds online a level earlier by getting unit skills like Canter and Dual Assist earlier than usual, and it makes it a lot more feasible to get enough SP to buy some of the really expensive skills before the very end of the game. The only issue I have with the skill books is that it's frustrating that they're providing a solution to the SP and skill economy of Engage in the form of DLC. Slow skill acquisition has been one of the most common complaints I've seen about Engage, and it would be nice if people didn't have to pay money to fix that issue. You may have also noticed that I've been running around in this Sami costume. That's also new in this DLC, along with a few other new cosmetics. The Sami outfit is hilarious, and my only complaint about it is that I can't wear it into battle. The meat of the new DLC is in the maps and emblems though, and the first one hits me right in the nostalgia. Hector is one of my favorite among the lords in Fire Emblem 7, which was the first Fire Emblem game I played way back in 2003. So I was psyched to see him make an appearance in Engage, and I was especially excited about his map because we didn't even have an FE7 map in Engage yet, since Lynn's map in the base game is from Fire Emblem 6. The map they chose for Hector was Chapter 30 of Fire Emblem 7, the Berserker. Thematically, this is a perfect pick. It's a map all about Hector proving his worthiness, and in Engage, the premise of the map is Hector asking you to prove yourself to him. Thematically, it's a great match. Mechanically, the Berserker is not my favorite map from FE7. It's a map where you only have 2 deployment slots, and it's fairly straightforward to play through. It works the first time because there's a lot of narrative weight behind the map, but I don't always enjoy it on replay. Additionally, part of the reason the Berserker works the first time in Fire Emblem 7 is that it's a very intimate experience. It's just Hector and one buddy gradually making their way to the boss. Engage can't really replicate this experience in a DLC map, so it loses a lot of what made the map memorable. Instead, the Engage map plays out pretty differently. Deployment is limited to 8 units, and the map compensates for the larger size of your army by more densely packing the enemies and adding a bunch of reinforcements. There's nothing wrong with this from a map design perspective, but it gives a very different feel than the Fire Emblem 7 version of the map. The Engage version of this map does feature one of the key standout features from the original map, the trapped walls. Many of the walls on this map are glowing purple, and at the end of each turn they shoot out toxic gas, which adds a stack of poison to any unit standing in the path. One stack of poison isn't such a big deal, but if you stand in a few in a row, it can really add up, so you need to be careful over the course of the map, or bring antitoxins and restore staves so that you can clear poison when it stacks up too high. The map also includes some chests that encourage you to play at a faster pace, but realistically, you'll probably catch the thieves before they escape, even if you're moving at a pretty slow pace. Hector is a pretty tricky boss at the end if you don't plan for him. His defense is massive to the point where most of my physical units couldn't even hurt him, but as long as you have enough magic users, you'll get through his health bars just fine. Overall, this map is okay, but there's nothing too exciting about it, and for me it fails to capture the emotions that the original map had. Given the way that the map is loaded with powerful enemies and reinforcements, I wonder if they would have been better served using a map like Dragon's Gate or Victory or Death. Maps that still have serious narrative significance in Fire Emblem 7, but where the volume of enemies and reinforcements would have felt more appropriate. Regardless of how you feel about the map though, it's all worth it to get that Hector emblem. Hector provides tons of tankiness, and his abilities center around fighting on enemy phase and with heavy weapons. His skills can allow you to double on enemy phase when your HP is high, do more damage with heavy weapons, and block off diagonal spaces. I expect that Hector is going to be a beast in the early game where you can throw him on a unit like Louis and make an early game enemy phase powerhouse, but you'll also be able to use him on squishier units with lower build like Chloe to make them a little beefier and to add extra damage when they use weapons that exceed their build. I'm most interested in trying him with the Citrine build that I have cooking up in my mind. Combining Hector's heavy attack skill, Olwyn's Dire Thunder, a Forged Thunder Tome, and Roy's Engrave, Citrine will be doubling from 3 range for insane damage. Point being, there are tons of interesting ways to use Hector, and it will be fun trying them all out and seeing what the best way to get value out of him is. The next DLC map I tackled was Camilla's. Camilla is an interesting choice from Fates. Obviously she's super popular, but it feels a little weird not to have Azura or any of the Hoshidans represented. Still, I have fond memories of Camilla destroying Conquest enemies after her arrival in Chapter 10, so I was excited to have her on my team once again. For her map in Engage, they went with Birthright Chapter 23, Camilla. I understand why they went with this map, since it's literally named after her and she was the boss of it. But boy was I hoping they'd do Conquest Chapter 10 or one of the other more interesting Conquest maps. This map is the worst of the 3 in the DLC. It's absolutely flooded with high avoid Griffin Knights, several carrying Levin swords that pack a serious punch. The reinforcements on this map never let up. A lot of the map could be skipped via a Micaiah warp, but playing it without warping is extremely slow, as you just sort of slowly and steadily make your way through the map, being careful not to bite off more reinforcements than you chew. The whole process takes forever, and there's only a few points where it's particularly interesting. The map also lacks meaningful side objectives, so there's not much reward to incentivize taking risks. Basically, the whole map is just slogging your way through constantly spawning enemies, or you can just warp skip it. So it just feels like a shame that they didn't go with one of the really interesting maps from Conquest for this emblem. The map's not too bad overall, but it's definitely below Engage's standards. Much like Hector though, the Camilla emblem does not disappoint. The first thing you'll notice when you throw the Camilla bracelet on someone is her sync skill, Dragon Vein. This ability is very similar to Corrin's Dragon Vein ability, which allows you to create terrain. Much like Corrin, Camilla is particularly potent on dragon units because they get to choose what kind of terrain they want to produce. The terrain made by Camilla is often a little different than the terrain Corrin makes. For example, Camilla's ice terrain increases movement speed instead of blocking off spaces. All of the terrains are also produced in a different pattern than Corrin's. For example, Camilla's fire makes an area around the user, while Corrin's fire makes an area in front of the user. This means you have to use Camilla's terrain a little differently than the way you use Corrin's terrain, but fundamentally the same principles apply. Being able to make terrain every turn is really strong in this game. Engaging with Camilla also provides strong abilities in the form of 2 extra spaces of movement and the ability to cross terrain as if the unit was a flyer. This is so strong, especially on units that have already inherited another mobility skill like Cantor. It becomes really easy to do quick hit and run attacks, get around walls, reach side objectives, and hide places where enemies can't hit you. There's just so much utility in extra movement and flying. And this is before we even get into her Engage attack, which deals area of effect damage and creates fire terrain. She also has inheritable skills that add even more damage to the emblem user. I think figuring out how to use Camilla in builds is pretty straightforward, but what she does is really strong, and it's going to be really fun dominating the early game with a 6-move Flying Louis. Finally, the last map of the DLC is Soren's. I was psyched that they added Soren to the game. His relationship with Ike has always been one of my favorites, and I was looking forward to having a more direct, less warm emblem. And Soren delivers. I thought they wrote his character pretty well, and he's very reminiscent of the way that he was in Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. But what about his map? Well, I think it's the best one of the 3. The map is surrounded by lava, and each turn, craters on the map are showered in lava, dealing serious damage. Additionally, smoke slowly fills up the map, creating spaces that inhibit movement and lower your defense. The longer you take, the harder it will be to position well because there will be more dangerous smoke tiles on the map. One cool thing about the smoke tiles is that making new terrain on the same square gets rid of the smoke. So if you bring Corrin or Camilla, you can actually interact with the smoke tiles at the cost of a unit's turn. The map begins in similar fashion to the other 2 from this DLC. There's an early onslaught of units coming at you right from the get-go. This part of the map was pretty easy compared to the other 2, particularly if you have Corrin or Camilla to slow down the enemies and take them on in smaller chunks. You can't take your time too much though, or the map will fill up with smoke and it will become tricky to take out Soren and his guards. The map becomes most challenging once you get near the end and Soren starts moving. He has bolting and the capability to crit any of your less lucky units, so you have to be careful how you approach him. He also uses his staff to buff his allies, so you'll want to take out as many of them as you can before he gets the buffs on them. Managing the terrain, smoke, and Soren's range made this by far the most interesting map of the 3 in the DLC for me. Like the other emblems, Soren brings some powerful new tools to the table once you recruit him. His sync skill, Assign Decoy, allows you to make a specific ally more likely to be attacked. I'm not quite sure exactly how this works based on the language that's used. Every time I've used it, enemies have always targeted the person I assigned as a decoy, but the language suggests that it's possible the enemies could attack someone else. At first glance though, this seems like a pretty good ability. It lets you move squishier units a little more aggressively, and then you can just assign decoy to a tankier unit on the team to protect them. Maybe you could even put a bond shield on the tankier unit. This is probably not an ability you're going to use every turn, but there are practical applications for it. When a unit is engaged to Soren, he allows the user to ignore part of an enemy's resistance and heal half the damage that they deal. As long as your mage can take a hit or two, this can enable some Nosferatu-esque drain tanking strategies. Though you still need to be careful if you have Soren on a unit with low defense, because to get the heal, they do need to survive the enemy attack. One of my favorite features from Soren is his Engage attack, which deals AoE damage and has an after effect depending on the unit type, ranging from leaving fire terrain behind to dealing more damage or having a chance to break each target that's hit. Another really cool feature that Soren brings is access to bolting, a super long-range engage weapon that can allow the user to snipe vulnerable enemies from far away. This could be used to kill thieves before they can escape, or contribute to combat from far away, or just to thin out low-resistance enemies before they can get close to your team. It's a great way to ensure that a unit will never have any dead turns, as it's pretty easy to always have a target in bolting range. Soren is a slam dunk addition to any magic unit, and with a little consideration can either help kill important targets from a distance, or drain tank through multiple enemy attacks. Overall, all of the emblems in the DLC are really fun to use and I think are going to be strong additions to any team. My only concern with them is that it feels like terrain effects are getting a little out of hand. At this point, Corin, Camilla, Hector, Roy, and Edelgard can all easily make terrain, and it can make it pretty easy to stall enemies for a long period of time on some maps. On the other hand, it is really fun figuring out the best way to use terrain, so maybe that's not such a bad thing. Beyond how the maps and emblems play mechanically, the presentation of this DLC is great. All of the emblems look awesome, and it's really fun seeing some of the older Fire Emblem maps in Engage's art style. The voice actors did a great job as well. I particularly liked Hector's super deep voice and the deadpan delivery of some of Soren's more frank dialogue. The only voice acting that threw me a little bit was Camilla's, who has a new voice actor compared to Fate's. The new voice actor does a great job, but the character sounds pretty different, which took me a little bit to get used to. The best part of the presentation in this DLC is the music by far. Every map comes with a new version of a track from the map's original game. All 3 of the tracks are great, but I loved the one from the Fire Emblem 7 map. Hearing that game remixed for this game was awesome, and I think for people that started with Radiant Dawn or Fates, the nostalgia is going to hit you just like it hit me. Looking at the DLC as a whole, I thought the maps were just okay on average, but I love the new emblems, and I think they open up new ways to build teams on replay. I also love the characters in the presentation, and I'm gonna have a blast reading each new emblem's bond conversations and trying out all of their different skills. I also appreciate the extra skill points from the skill books, even if I think they really should have been available without buying the DLC. So on the whole, I would grade this DLC Wave a B. And as long as Wave 3 and 4 keep the same quality up, it's well worth the price of admission to get to play with the new emblems and see the old maps reimagined in Engage. You may have noticed that a lot of the footage in this video is from streams. I live streamed all of the DLC maps, and I'll be streaming a new playthrough of Engage on Wednesdays at 6 PM CST and Saturdays at noon CST, so swing by if you'd like, I'd love to chat with you. Also, in the last video I mentioned a giveaway for a copy of Fire Emblem Engage. That giveaway ends on Friday the 17th, so if you want a chance to win, hit the Gleam link in the video description and put your entry in. Lastly, if you liked this video and you want to see more videos like it, consider hitting the like or subscribe button so that you don't miss an upload, and have yourself an awesome week.